Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2003 horror family comedy, The Haunted Mansion. Now, this is one that I was honestly really excited about seeing when it came out because I was a big fan of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland, and I was also a big fan of Eddie Murphy. And so the two of them together to me was like something that I honestly felt could be really cool. And this was also after Pirates of the Caribbean came out, which I was a huge fan of. And it's a film that really surprised me because I didn't necessarily feel that adapting a theme park ride was actually going to turn out to be a good movie. So I honestly felt like The Haunted Mansion had a lot of potential to be a fun and thrilling and enjoyable ride, just like the Pirates film was. But even as a kid, I was disappointed by this film. And honestly, I'm still disappointed by this movie. And before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the Haunted Mansion, I would like to give a special shout out yet again to Bronson for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Haunted Mansion is directed by Rob Minkoff, and Rob Minkoff is a guy who he's got some pretty good credits on his resume. I mean, he directed The Lion King, the 90s animated classic. He also directed Stuart Little, but a lot of his filmography features films that feature a lot of animation or heavy animation when it comes to his directing actually being really uh, good. The Haunted Mansion, though, is not really one of those movies. There's a little bit of CGI in this, and there are some moments that are akin to some of the stuff that you might see in an animated project or an animated film. I know Stuart Little's technically live action, but there was a lot more animated segments done with CGI animation in that, where like entire sequences were completely done with a CGI. And The Haunted Mansion isn't really one of those films. So you have a director who's really comfortable and has really honed their skills in a completely different realm and overall frame of media. And so sometimes that can turn out to be something that works, like some of the stuff that Brad Bird has done later on in his career after he did The Incredibles and stuff like that. But other times it can be closer to what you see here, where the direction's a bit flat at times. It's not as lively or as energetic or as inventive or creative or as skilled as what the director would showcase in the realm of animation. I feel Rob Minkoff might not have been the best choice to direct this. I think maybe having somebody like Joe Dante or somebody who has a little bit more familiarity in terms of directing horror comedies or just directing films in general that deal with a lot of sets and a lot of things that are just trying to showcase a lot of motion in live action. I really feel that that might have been a better pick for a film like this. It's almost like it was a hire that was done because, oh, hey, he directed The Lion King. That was one of our biggest hits. Let's have him direct the Haunted Mansion movie. And they didn't really think about whether or not he was the right fit. And the direction, it's not entirely bad by any means. There's some moments like the mausoleum scene and a few other sequences that are really just focused primarily on showcasing the elaborate Haunted Mansion set that are pretty good. But when it comes to some of the comedic stuff, when it comes to the dramatic scenes, when it comes to the scenes that don't have skeletal corpses walking around, it's kind of bland. It's kind of boring visually. And the direction is just not really that dynamic. It's not really that interesting in terms of the camera angles or the perspectives or the zooms or the pans or any of the other camera techniques that Minkoff employs. Also, I don't think he got some of the best performances out of some of his cast either. There's a lot of points in this where Eddie is kinda just going through the motions, but then there's other points where his performance is actually surprisingly full of life and energy, and it's the old Eddie Murphy that you know and love, and that's definitely where, uh, uh the film shines in a lot of ways in terms of the performances from the cast is when the director is able to get some strong authentic performances out of them, but then there's other moments where it's just it's not it's honestly just as stiff and stilted as some of the rest of the direction is. So, yeah, I definitely do feel that Rob Minkoff was not a good choice to direct this. I've heard, fan casting theories and fan ideas in terms of a Haunted Mansion movie, and Tim Burton was brought up. That's a better pick as well than somebody like Rob Minkoff. The screenplay is by David Barenbaum, and David Barenbaum, to me personally, is already an incredibly overrated writer, and he only got this because of the surprise success of Elf. Elf was a hit, and then he got the script for this. Although Elf and The Haunted Mansion came out the same year, but I think the screenplay for Elf is definitely something that spread around the industry, and Disney was like, "Well, we want some of that talent. We want some of that magic for The Haunted Mansion." But I don't really feel that he was really the best writer for this either because he's not really that adept at writing horror. He's not really that adept, honestly, at writing consistently good comedy either. I'm one of the few people in the world that actually thinks Elf isn't really that great. So having the guy who wrote Elf isn't really necessarily a positive for me. Also, this is the same guy who was one of the writers on Zoom, which is one of the worst superhero films ever made, and one of the worst comedies of the 2000s. So it's not like this guy has done nothing but hit after hit when it comes to his writing. This is a very weak script. From the very beginning, it starts off on a really bad foot because it showcases and essentially spoils things in the opening credits. It's like the writer was instructed by Disney to dumb down things as much as possible so people won't have any sort of confusion or won't have any reason to be asking any questions throughout the film, which is a problem because this is a movie that would have benefited from some genuine mystery other than the head of Gracie Manor's wife dying in a way that wasn't suicide. Because other than that, like, there's really no mystery. Because you already know that Edward Gracie is dead because the opening credits give that away. So that was one thing that I feel definitely was a significant problem with this script for me, because there's a good chunk of the movie where they're trying to protect this secret that he's a ghost, and there's even moments where it's set up in a way that's like, oh, see, he's a ghost now, and he can teleport and he can move around real quickly, and that has no impact because you already knew that he was a ghost due to how badly the opening of the film botched things. And you're kind of in a bad spot when even the opening credits just is very off. It's not, and that's not really a screenplay thing, it's just an observation from me. Like, it has some really dated, bad, shitty looking CGI in it. The font even looks, like it doesn't necessarily fit the film. The music choice, by Mancina is just honestly pretty ill-fitting as well, and then you have this weird editing, and it's just a very strange and, off-putting way to open up the film. And then the characterization is also not that great. So you have the Evers family. So you have the the husband Jim Evers and his wife Sarah Evers, and there's that typical drama between the two. The husband works too hard and ignores his responsibilities as a husband and as a father, and throughout the film, he's tested and he winds up strengthening the bond between his wife and his kids. And it's like, okay, all right, I get it. It's a family movie, but man, that was so generic. That was such a generic thing to throw in there. And typical stuff with the kids too, where one of the kids, the younger brother, he's afraid, and instead of him being afraid of ghosts, he's afraid of spiders. And so there's a scene where he has to conquer his fears to open the mausoleum door to help his father and his sister. The sister, though, is a very boring character because it just seems like, oh, I can do anything. You know, she doesn't seem like she's scared. She doesn't seem like she's phased by anything most of the time. There's some moments where she's showing a bit of some fear in the mausoleum, like when she has to go under the water and sees a corpse down there when she's trying to find a key. But other than that, like this character it's just a very boring character. But honestly, both of the kids are pretty boring. And there's a large chunk of the movie in the finale where they're just trapped in a trunk, and honestly, the movie doesn't lose anything. And that's a bad sign when you have some characters who have a significant amount of screen time go missing or aren't a part of the movie anymore, and it's not really that big of a detriment to the film. And the husband and wife real estate couple, they did the whole stuff with the real estate gags that was pretty lame, especially when it comes to the way that he tries to advertise his company in various ways. You know, we're from Evers and Evers. If you don't like our deal, you know, it was something like, we're gonna make sure that you enjoy your house forever and ever. Like it was just very lame. And that's a running theme throughout this script. It's just very lame. The comedy, for the most part, pretty lame, other than a couple moments where Eddie Murphy either ad libs or throws in some comedy that is somewhat edgy, like the knockers joke. But even that was just a total rip off of the same joke in Young Frankenstein. So even that isn't really anything that I can really give the writers a lot of credit for. There's a bit at the end when he's trying to get Edward to read the letter and Edward is refusing, and so he gets a little more heated with him, and he's like, you know, if you don't read this letter, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to come back as a ghost and I'm going to whoop your ass all throughout this mansion. And you're like, okay, cool. There's the Eddie that I know and love, but there's not a lot of that though. A lot of Eddie in this, he's very restrained, and that's because of what's in the script, and that's because of the tone. Why is this PG? This was clearly made because of the success of Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl was PG-13. This is a horror film or horror comedy. Should have been PG-13 as well. It should have had edgier jokes. Should have had Eddie be able to be a little bit more edgy in terms of his particular comedy, but as well as everyone else, including the ghosts and so on and so forth. for whatever reason, Disney just felt like they had to play it safe with this instead of going bold and risky like they did with Pirates. And I know there's a lot of people who have nostalgia for this and they enjoy it. And there are some moments where the script is fun. The mausoleum scene, I think, is great. I think that's a really good scene. I think there are a few other moments, like when they're first interacting with the spirits at the mansion, or the stuff with Leona, or the singing busts. There's stuff like that that shows promise. I think even the villain, Ramsley, has his moments as well, especially when he's just one big jump scare for comedic value. But that character is also very bland and pretty one note. And there's not really a lot about him that is particularly that interesting. And for a Haunted Mansion film, yeah, you get like Madame Leona and the Crystal Ball, and you get the singing busts, but the Hatbox Ghost basically does nothing. There's a bunch of other Haunted Mansion characters and ghosts that have appearances, but they're basically blink and you miss it, and they don't have anything to do. And with the whole ghost stuff, like, why is it that some of these characters, it's a secret that they're ghosts, but then with other ones it's very obvious. It's like, why not just have it be a mystery the entire time and be more mysterious and eerie and surreal and different with how the ghosts move around the house and how they interact with the house guests. But instead, what you get is just like some really bland, boring, dull stuff. Like, that isn't even anything close to the kind of wild craziness that you see in the actual ride itself. And there's even moments in the script where it just feels like it's ripping off not just like Young Frankenstein, but also like Casper. Like, there's a whole scene where Eddie Murphy's character Jim Evers walks in front of a mirror, sees his face all disfigured and rotting. Oh, I'm like, oh yeah, like Casper or Poltergeist. Like, that felt played out even back then, and even more so now. So there's really not a lot about it creativity wise that is really that unique or that cool, which just feels like a complete missed opportunity when it comes to a Haunted Mansion movie. One of the biggest selling points of that ride is its creativity. And there's like a typical ending where the spirits wind up going to heaven. But have to admit, I did not necessarily see a dragon hellfire, like a dragon made out of hellfire popping up out of the ground, out of literal hell, and dragging Terence Stamp's character, the evil butler, back to hell. That was pretty unexpected. I'll give the writer that, but it's also another instance of tonal whiplash. It's like, this is a PG film, clearly trying to be very tame, and then you have like a hellfire dragon that's dragging somebody to hell. Like, it feels out of place. And there's some moments too that are very awkward in terms of the writing, like the whole way that everything is handled with Sarah when she dies after she drinks the poison, and then the spirit of Master Gracie's long lost lover, Elizabeth, possesses her temporarily. She has this moment with Edward where they kiss and they have this conversation, but then Jim says, "Hey, that's my wife." And then the spirit just suddenly leaves, and now Sarah is back, and just the way that that was handled was very clunky and really bad, in my opinion. Like, it just felt like that was not really that well thought out at all. And then, like, even the ending, like, for whatever reason, Jim decides to take Madame Leona and the singing, busts with him. Why? Why would he ever wanna do that? Especially after everything that he went through, especially after Leona really she was somewhat helpful in terms of helping him try to find all the stuff to be able to get the key to open the trunk, but she was not very, agreeable to work with. So it doesn't seem like it's somebody that you wanna have around for the rest of your life. It just that was just weird. I guess it's because it's a Disney movie. We can't just leave those characters there in the mansion. Why not? It's the Haunted Mansion. I was surprised that it didn't end with Jim deciding to create an attraction out of the actual mansion. And that's what he did with the deed that he was given by Edward. He turned it into the actual haunted mansion. So you get a bit of meta elements there. And it's such a hit that now Jim has plenty of time to be with his family and and to spend time with his kids and his wife because of the fact that he doesn't have to grind for these real estate deals anymore because he has this massively successful haunted mansion. But no, you don't even get that. They just get in their van and drive to the lake, I guess, and that's it. So it's just not it's not really that great of a screenplay. It really is not. I mean, there's a reason why critics weren't that impressed by this film when it came out, and why there's a lot of people to this day that still aren't really that into it. I know it has a cult following now. There are people who grew up with it. I grew up with Halloween Town. I grew up with Hocus Pocus. I grew up with a lot of the same films a lot of the millennials or Gen Z people grew up with. And even as a kid, I thought this sucked. And as an adult, I still don't think this is that good. I mean, Eddie Murphy himself thinks that this wasn't really that good of a movie. He he had an interview like a year ago, and he's all like, "Yeah, I did a haunted mansion, and it was not all that and a bag of chips." Yeah, he was like, it wasn't very good. And honestly, I agree with Eddie. And I think in large part, it has to do with the script. The script is the worst element of the movie because it doesn't really do the best job making you like the characters either, which is another problem. They're just tolerable, but they're not characters that you really love. Uh, the Evers family is not a family that you love and you really want to be around and you really want to join them on this adventure. The villains, they're very tame, and in one case, one is clearly not a villain, and they just drag it out way too long in terms of the reveal of him just being manipulated by the butler. And the best characters were like Ezra and Emma, really. Those were the most interesting characters and the ones that were the most fun to watch. And they were ghosts. So the human characters aren't even the ones that you really are connecting with the most when it comes to the Haunted Mansion movie. And like I said, the ghost stuff isn't really that unique or interesting, so that isn't really that much of a selling point either, other than the mausoleum scene. And the cast, I like Eddie Murphy. He's honestly one of my favorite actors when it comes to him in his prime. This is not Eddie in his prime. This is Eddie when he's on the decline. And there are some moments where his performance is actually not that bad. He's got some energy with his lines, but then there's other moments where either his heart isn't fully into it or he's just sleepwalking through his scenes. So it's just a very mixed bag of a performance for me when it comes to Eddie Murphy. I definitely feel the PG rating was very limiting. I wish you had something more similar to the tone of The Golden Child. in terms of the comedy. That would have been a lot better, in my opinion, and it would have led to a better performance by Eddie as well. Terence Stamp, he is playing this very cold, unfeeling character, but it works because Terence Stamp has a really good deadpan and he plays a good bad guy. So I'll give Terence Stamp credit. I think he's definitely one of the better performers in this cast. Nathaniel Parker, similar to Eddie, is just it's a mixed bag with him too. Like there were some moments with his performance where I thought it was pretty decent, but then there's other moments where his line delivery wasn't the best, or his accent came and went, or it just wasn't consistent. Marsha Thomason, for the most part, I thought was terrible. I genuinely thought that her performance was really bad and really poor. She had no chemistry whatsoever with Eddie Murphy. So that's another reason why I didn't really buy this family dynamic, because I never really bought that the two of them were madly in love with one another. And yeah, her line delivery was as lifeless as a corpse half the time, or the majority of the time. I thought it was. I genuinely do feel it was a bad performance. It's almost like she was cast solely because of the fact that she could play two different roles. She could play Elizabeth and then also play Sarah, and not necessarily due to her acting ability or a screen test with Eddie Murphy. Um, Jennifer Tilly, not bad casting as Madame Leota. I guess it's Leota, not Leona. I thought it was Leona. I mean, I could have sworn I heard Leona, but I guess it's Leota. Whatever. My bad. I'm pretty sure there's probably some people have already commented, It's Leota, not Leona." I'm like, "Okay, I get it now. I'm sorry." Um, but yeah, she was fine. Her shrill voice and her whole shtick worked for that kind of character. Wallace Shawn, he was fun as the footman, and I really like Dina Spybey as Emma, as the nervous, helpful maid. Like she was fun. She was. I honestly, I think her and Wallace Shawn had the best chemistry out of anyone in the entire cast. And the kids, Marc John Jeffries and Aree Davis as Michael and Megan Evers, they were also just kind of there for me. So yeah, a lot of the cast members, like there's a couple standout performers, but a lot of the time it's just very mediocre performances or worse. So it's not the best cast either. The cinematography by Remy Farrison. Sorry, it's got a weird last name. It's not awesome, but it's not awful either. I think it does a good job in terms of establishing a setting and a particular mood. It's especially at its best when it's showing the mansion at night and you're showing like lightning in the background, and it's incorporating all the different sort of shadowy lighting and everything. The editing by Priscilla Ned Friendly at times is not friendly to the eyes. It looks like they cut some scenes, or the editor just chopped things too tightly, or cut things off too soon at points, or lets things go on a little bit too long. So the editing is not one of the best parts of this movie either. The music by Mark Mancina, I think he's done better Disney work than this, but it's still fine. It still works for the film. It's still decent enough. It's got a good amount of energy and verve and vitality to it. It's spirited enough, to be honest. The score. I did like the makeup effects when you did see them by Rick Baker, but I would have liked to have seen more of his work in it. I also liked the makeup on the resurrected skeletal corpses in the mausoleum. Like that stuff was really well done. That looked great. So there are some moments of the makeup where it looks good, or the visual effects definitely do look pretty convincing. And I also feel that the production and art design was incredible. Like that's one of the best things about this movie is the mansion set itself. Like, they really did a great job with that. I just wish it was featured in a much better movie. But yeah, it's crazy to me that this movie's like 87 minutes and it still drags and it's still kind of boring and still not really that enthralling or exciting, despite the fact that it's a pretty short film in terms of the runtime. Um, yeah, this is one of those haunted house films or ghost movies that it's just kind of lazy and uninspired and just not really that much fun. Like it has some moments where I could kind of deal with it, but for the most part, I was not a fan. Like I would definitely not revisit this one again. And I mean, it's kind of fitting that this cover art is so lazy. That's a really lazy, bad Photoshop with Eddie Murphy making a stock, shocked face that you would see on YouTube thumbnails. Because that's the kind of effort that you get for the most part with Disney's The Haunted Mansion from 2003. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of The Haunted Mansion. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.